panel specifically is looking at three aspects of a business as it relates to their day-to-day operations. Number one is where the business is located and whether they own or lease commercial real estate, which is typically always the case. So Bill's going to address specifically some of those areas that could be addressed. We'll get into Joe, which will deal with commercial insurance, and Joe has been a friend of MBBI, and AJ Gallagher has been a friend of MBBI, and basically commercial insurance is going down. And so any kind of savings a business owner could gain in looking at their commercial insurance is going to be a direct multiple in the sale price. And then lastly, a little bit harder stretch to make the business owner understand, but probably one of the most important, is that if a business owner is managing their business and they want to sell it, what happens when the business owner leaves? Typically, a lot of the business value goes with the business owner because they're calling on the clients, they're involved with the customers, and what they've done is they haven't really built a business to sell. They've managed a business and it really can't be sold. And so Jeff's going to deal with employee training and really trying to get a business owner to lead a business instead of managing a business, thus making it more saleable. So
if you look at the real estate as a component of the overall expense structure of a business, is that real estate actually adding value to the long-term development of the company? And many sellers don't want anything to do with even analyzing that because they don't know who the new buyer is going to be. Do they want to undertake that entire process? But in these examples here, kind of going through different companies that I've worked with in the past, by having a good solid footprint, it actually makes your business more saleable. And you can do that in a number of different ways, either by location. You can do that by actually decreasing your operating costs as a business owner, which drives dollars directly to the bottom line, which makes it a higher sales price. And the other side, on the sell side, or on the buy side rather, is to look at the real estate that's in place and determine whether or not there's a play on the real estate to create more value when purchasing the business. And can you relocate, can you move it, can you consolidate? And those are a couple of the case studies that I'll review. This cloud tax is a substantial dollar amount, and some of the larger startups are seeing it. And again, I think you're immune for 2 years from the cloud, from your startup, but after that, you're going to be fully taxed for it. It could be a 6 to 7 figure number depending on size.
In this particular case, if this individual has a $5 million business, they're paying, I believe it was over $500,000 in insurance.
Oh, I underestimated it. I'm sorry. $500,000.
Yeah, $500,000 insurance. It's a tremendous cost relative to the revenues you're bringing in. And if we take that example of say, 10%, $50,000 that you're paying this individual, I mean, that's probably 2 employees. That's or one full-time person devoted exclusively to managing the insurance program that requires maybe 2 weeks of work, added up over the course of a year.
So this company approached us and said, okay, something's broken, we need to fix it. And many times the owners don't know that it's them that are broken. And we all have our own businesses, we all know our strengths and our weaknesses. We are finding those who are more receptive to looking at themselves are more receptive to actually growing and more able to grow the company. Most employees are not engaged. I think it's somewhere, I've heard anywhere from 14%, only 14% are highly engaged, but the average is around 30%, 38% of employees are actually engaged in the work. Why? Just because the owners don't involve them. Having gone through 2008, and then a lot of manufacturing companies realized that they didn't necessarily have to increase people's wages as much for many years thereafter. And having experienced that, what I saw is a lot of employees will put up with more than we think that they'll put up with. But it also realizes that it doesn't take very much to make employees very happy. And so those companies who actually are investing in employees are actually getting a higher return because they're getting engagement out of their employees right now.
And here, MBBI is focusing on creating deals this year. And so, what are ways to create deals? As an M&A intermediary or as an attorney or accountant, you know businesses that are likely going to become coming up for sale. And the question is, if you're transactional, you may not necessarily be involved in the sale until the transaction starts. But if you know, as their trusted advisor, that they're going to be selling in the next couple of years, then now is a great time to be able to introduce them to a couple of areas that maybe they should focus on. In the meantime, have you looked at your insurance lately? Have you looked at your occupancy costs and where you're located at? Have you looked at the management structure of your company? I know you work 100 hours a week and you're talking about selling in 2 years. You don't seem like the type of person that's ultimately going to be able to sell. So I think at the end of the day, it's our responsibility as trusted advisors to these business owner companies to make some of these introductions, because what will happen is you'll make them a better company because of it. They'll be stronger, and then when it comes time to sell the company, then obviously they're going to look towards you to help them with that sale, whether it's legal, accounting, or actually selling the business. Okay, so as part of our moderated panel discussion, what we're trying to do is maximize the sale price of a business, and we're looking at 3 key areas that can be addressed. And all of us in this room work with business owners, have business owner clients as customers, and so at our January conference, Alex talked to us about potentially helping those business owners grow the value of their company by looking at sales and growing your top line sales anywhere from 10 to 20%, training salespeople, educating salespeople on communication and some other things. And Alex has done a good job at that, and that's why he'll lead a session afterwards to our business owner attendees. What we're going to address with this panel specifically is looking at 3 aspects of a business as it relates to their day-to-day operations. Number 1 is where the business is located and whether they own or lease commercial real estate, which is typically always the case. So Bill's going to address specifically some of those areas that could be addressed. I don't know if anyone knows here, but if you own property or do business in the city of Chicago, yes or no? Does it cost more to operate here? Does anyone know the answer to that? Yes? Show your hands. No, so not many people know, so maybe you can educate everyone on that. And then we'll get into Joe, which will deal with commercial insurance. And Joe has been a friend of MBBI, and AJ Gallagher has been a friend of MBBI. And basically, commercial insurance is going down. And so any kind of savings a business owner could gain in looking at their commercial insurance is going to be a direct multiple in the sale price. And then lastly, a little bit harder stretch to make the business owner understand, but probably one of the most important, is that if a business owner is managing their business and they want to sell it, what happens when the business owner leaves? Typically, a lot of the business value goes with the business owner because they're calling on the clients, they're involved with the customers, and what they've done is they haven't really built a business to sell. They've managed a business, and it really can't be sold. And so Jeff's going to deal with employee training and really trying to get a business owner to lead a business instead of managing a business, thus making it more saleable. So everybody already introduced themselves, and they each have PowerPoint slides they're going to attendees and the attendee list, so we'll send that back out to you afterwards. But if there are specific questions, obviously feel free to ask throughout. I have questions that I've written up as well that we'll ask them, but I think with the size of the audience, it should be pretty dynamic. So why don't we start with, make sure, ooh, I already did it. So why don't we start with Bill as it relates to commercial real estate. So you tell me which slides you want to be on. I get something to do.
We'll probably just go to the case studies.
Case studies, okay, so let's go to that. Oh, there it goes. There's case study 1. So Bill, go ahead.
I think the big thing to talk about and how I've worked with business brokers in the past is either on the buy or sell side. But I think if you look at the real estate as a component of the overall expense structure of a business, is that real estate actually adding value to the long-term development of the company. And many sellers don't want anything to do with even analyzing that because they don't know who the new buyer is going to be. Do they want to undertake that entire process? But in these examples here, and just kind of going through different companies that I've worked with in the past, by having a good consolidated footprint, it actually makes your business more saleable. And you can do that in a number of different ways, either by location. You can do that by actually decreasing your operating costs as a business owner, which drives dollars directly to the bottom line, which makes it a higher sales price. And the other side, on the sell side, or on the buy side rather, is to look at the real estate that's in place and determine whether or not there's a play on the real estate to create more value when purchasing the business. And can you relocate, can you move in, can you consolidate? And those are a couple of the case studies that I'll review. So the first one is a tech company that had some rapid growth, and they saw an opportunity to continue to increase the growth, but they needed to be able to house more salespeople in order to accomplish it. So what we did is we leveraged the marketplace that they were in. They were in the northwest suburbs, and we took an opportunity whereby the asset that they were located in had a higher rent than the general market area at the time that we did this deal. And we found several alternative competing properties that we were able to examine leasing space at. And given the nature of the market, we were able to leverage what we were able to find at those assets, go to this existing landlord, who we had about 18 months left on the lease. We got our expansion space, we committed to a longer-term lease, and which enabled us to really get the space we needed to house the people, the salespeople, to drive our top-line revenue. And we kept the operating costs of real estate the same. So originally, the owner of the business was not really excited about doing this. They didn't want to take on additional costs. They didn't want to, extend themselves further without seeing the revenue come in. And by, using transactional information and leveraging different positions of different landlords, we're able to get their deal done, having the same cost of occupancy.
So what would that mean? Tell me like I'm a 2-year-old, which I'm not, I'm 3. But tell me what that would mean, because what's he thinking in his mind? I mean, what would it have cost him to move, obviously, and then, that's quite a hurdle, obviously, to take on more space and pay the same. How does that work?
So, essentially, this opportunity he took out about 4,000 square feet of additional office space, which if he just would have gone to the landlord, knocked on the door and said, hey, we need 4,000 square feet of expansion space, it would probably cost him in the neighborhood of about, probably $80,000 a year to do so. That was kind of the rate that he was paying his lease. The market at that point in time, the process to the point where we were able to get this entire lease term at about $16 a square foot, which with the different concessions we had with rental abatement, with improvement ability from the landlord contributing, we were able to buy furniture for the space and the landlord's dime, and we were able to, essentially keep his cost of occupancy consistent.
And then did he have in his mind what he equated to the top line revenue growth by having the additional space?
Sure, he was able to add about 8 salespeople in an additional space. I don't know what his per seat revenue was, but he had about 15 at that point
next example?
So this example is based upon consolidation. And so this scenario sets forth where we had a company that worked in the roadside assistance arena, and they had a corporate office, and they had used private equity monies to basically buy several other locations throughout the United States. They then paid off the PE firm, and in the end, we're left with outsourcing all their printing needs. So they printed essentially the cards to keep your wallet that you're on the side of the road, dial your 800 number, and they'll come and save you. So what they ended up doing is they ended up buying a printing company that could produce these cards in-house, which cut out a lot of the profit on the other side of it for the third party. And they were left with both a management and the cost of having two separate locations. So by consolidating both their corporate office and their production space under one roof, they were able to have a cost savings on their real estate side line item, in addition to picking up efficiencies in management, inventory control, and therefore, essentially bringing their gross revenue up, increase the gross revenue.
So any idea on how much cost they saved?
They saved about 25% on the real estate scenario.
Which is what?
This particular example was probably about $60,000 a year.
And they grew the revenue.
Correct.
Any idea how much?
I don't know how much.
Okay,
The change just happened third quarter last year.
perfect. Great. Scenario number 3. Nice.
So this is the market location. We see a lot of large corporate America migrating towards the city of Chicago. There's some obvious reasons for that, for demographic and hiring. However, the cost that's associated with the downtown real estate is going to continue to increase with the real estate taxes and the budget deficit. There's some forecasts out there that are going to see a 50 to 65% increase in real estate taxes alone. So if you're looking at a net lease, you can stare down the barrel of a pretty significant shotgun. And in doing so, these privately held companies, getting them to relocate back to the suburbs could be a substantial cost savings. So there's not a definitive reason why they need to be located in Chicago, particularly Cook County. You're going to find some significant cost savings to locating some of your manufacturing, logistics, your larger floor plate users outside of Chicago, and in particular Cook County, where you get a Collin County tax bill. It's typically 50% of the cost of occupancy of a Cook County tax bill. So if you're in a 50,000 square foot manufacturing building and you're located in Lake County or DuPage County, you can see a tax bill of $1.85 a square foot. If you're in a light kind of property in Cook, you might be looking at a $3.50 to $4 tax bill for a light kind of property. So if you are operating a business and you're positioning it to sell, that's an easy way to create a pretty large delta. In that example, I mean, you're probably looking at minimum 50 to possibly $100,000 savings just on the tax bill. So this example is a very similar space. We had an expanding company that was located in Elk Grove Village, and unfortunately at the time that we had acquired the asset, which was 2007, we were unable to procure a 6B tax credit, which is a 6B tax credit that basically takes the real estate taxes in Cook County, makes it comparable to Gallagher County, because they know that they have a taxation issue in Cook. So that's how they stay competitive on the manufacturing front.
But you have to fight for that, right? Theoretically?
I mean, theoretically, yes. You need municipal support first and foremost. If the municipality supports it, then more than likely the county will support it. It used to be a rubber stamp, not quite that way, but there's certainly a proven reason that it definitely helps with creating occupancy and some slight indolence. But the long and short of it is this group is expanding in Elk Grove Village. they had to acquire another 7,500 to 10,000 square feet space for warehousing. We ended up moving them out of Cook County and into Ocala County. They were able to service the additional space they needed, and again, they realized the same operating costs or the occupancy costs for real estate that they had in their smaller facility in Cook County.
So what's the value driver here besides several? I mean, if we come across someone that's looking to sell their business and it's located in, let's say, Cook County, and we'll leave out Chicago for a second, is this a one-year sale, that type of thing? In their mind, right, they're thinking of selling in the next 6 months. If you see $100,000 of increased cost as it relates to being in Cook County, not to mention the mental and psychological and moving employees to go to a different location, all that thrown in. Is this a one-year sell to someone to say that this takes a year to get accomplished? Is this a 6-month sell?
Every situation is going to be different. I mean, it depends on what the actual company is doing, in terms of the process of moving. It could be as simple as a 3-month lead time to accomplish something like this. It could be as much as 18 months.
But 18 months is because of heavy machinery and equipment. So if they physically don't have any equipment, then you're looking at maybe a 3 to 6 month process.
Correct.
Identify the real estate. You're assuming that their finances lined up.
Correct.
Interesting. Great. And then, of course, further on to point out that any one of these cost savings at today's multiples, depending on the company, so it's $100,000 cost savings at a 3 multiple is obviously $300,000 addition to the top line sale price. 4 multiple, 400,000, 5 multiple. If you're in a business that's a 10 multiple, this could theoretically be an additional $1 million on the sale price just by going through the process to consider moving the location prior to listing it for sale. And I can speak from my experience of financing buyers. That's a huge consideration in whether someone is going to buy businesses where it's located at. I mean, there was in one particular deal, now this is the reverse, it ended up being up towards Oswego, I think, or something like that, but all the buyers were in the northwest suburbs looking at it. And I said, well, how long does it take to get there? And, they'd come back with during the day or at like midnight, so, I mean, that answer could be 45 minutes up to 2 hours each way. So, it not only does it save the current business the expense, which leads to higher valuation of the company and sale price, it could be a strong consideration from anyone trying to buy the company. Last question, Bill. What's this whole internet tax thing that the city of Chicago passed? Is it a dream? Is it reality? Is it happening?
Seems like it's happening. The cloud tax.
Yeah, so what's that mean?
Not an expert in it by any means, but essentially the government has passed a tax that anything you use that is through the cloud. So any seats you have for like a contact resource manager like Salesforce, any online databases, this cloud tax is a substantial dollar amount, and some of the larger startups are seeing it. And again, I think you're immune for 2 years for the cloud from your startup, but after that you're going to be fully taxed for it. It could be 6 to 7 figure number depending on size.
So help me understand, this is the company that provides cloud-based services, or this is the user of the cloud-based services?
The user.
The user. So if I have an internet subscription through Comcast, is that taxed, or is it you're saying if I'm
I'm not an expert in that, but I don't believe it's Comcast. I believe it's an actual database like a Salesforce.
I see.
So like Google, for instance, I think that was kind of a little bit of a backdoor scenario with them on how to generate some more revenue for the city of Chicago.
Interesting. It's amazing how things work here in the city of Chicago. So. All right, thank you very much. So let's get to Joe. Joe from AJ Gallagher, you wanted to describe this slide for us.
Yeah, there's a slide for company, each one of these items, but we're just going to work off of the main slide. So Tom alluded to the fact the insurance marketplace in general stuff. We're all here today to discuss how to maximize the value for our clients. And if we're able to come in and save money for them, how it's directly going to correlate into an increased value in the sale. So how does insurance play into that? Any broker obviously is going to have somewhat of a reflection on what the overall marketplace is doing. There hasn't been any natural disasters, there hasn't been a lot of claims, the market's pretty stable, and so how are insurance companies actually picking up more market share? There's a lot of consolidation, mergers and acquisitions within the insurance company space, but again, now they're able to get very aggressive in trying to get an increased market share. And so if every broker has access to just the general stuff in the marketplace, how does the broker come in and actually differentiate himself and provide that value to clients so that he can recognize that in the sale price? Something that Gallagher is doing, something we're able to afford to do, being such a large broker. Our larger competitors are focused on the Fortune 500, Fortune 1000. We're the largest broker that focuses on the smaller and middle market clients. And we try to take an approach using this Core 360 model. And so most insurers, they look at their premiums and they say, I just want to lower the price. Okay, the market's going down, that's great, but how can I get an even better price than what the market's bearing? Well, there's all these hidden costs. So rather than focusing on what is the price that I'm paying, how can I lower that? Certainly let's focus on that. What are the hidden costs that go into the overall risk management program you have? And so beyond the premium, we want to focus on the program structure, losses beneath the deductible, uninsurable and uninsured losses, coverage gaps, and contractual liability. And when you put all these things into the larger picture, we can actually quantify what is the true cost of your risk management program, not just the insurance premiums based on the policies that you're purchasing. So this is proprietary to us, and no other large broker is doing this, providing this service to lower and middle market clients. So it's a tremendous differentiator. But let's take a step back. Instead of focusing on just protecting our assets, I think everybody in this room might agree that insurance is really protecting the bottom line and preventing, if there was some kind of catastrophe, how to prevent the business from going out of business, how to keep them in business. So if we shift our focus away from the bottom line, I don't think anybody in this room would say insurance is certainly growing revenue by any means. How do we focus on the top line? However, I would disagree. If we shifted to, say, uninsurable and uninsured losses, so that would be slide 4 now if you want to move forward to the maroon. Some of this we're skipping over, but I just wanted to try and make this point. I think it's very relevant to what's in the room and probably different than anything you've heard relative to insurance.
Ooh, that's purple. That's maroon, right? Okay.
You'll notice on the left-hand side of the slide and then the bottom right-hand corner of that half, something called trade credit. And something that Gallagher does very skillfully along with a lot of other products is offering this trade credit solution. If we're able to go to our clients and say, hey, if you went to your current customer base, people you're already selling to, people who already trust you and like you, you're doing business with, and we're able to say, if you go to them and say, we're going to offer you greater capacity and better terms, would you buy more from us? And almost 100% of the time, every one of those customers would say, well, certainly we buy more from you. Well, what if we could put an insurance program in place that's insuring your receivables? Maybe you do a lot overseas, and the financials of the customers overseas aren't very strong or unreliable potentially. We can put insurance policies in place that are going to remove letters of credit and increase the capacity and the terms in which your current customers can already purchase them. And there's some case studies that I'd be happy to send you, connect offline and talk about. But those are programs we're putting in place that are actually increasing revenues using an insurance product, which I think is very interesting and conversations that most brokers are not having with their clients. So if we take a step back and go back maybe to that main slide, Tom.
You know, while you're here, and that one thing called cyber, just touch on that real quick, because I think most companies are uninsured, right, as it relates to that?
Certainly. It's a growing trend in our industry. Many businesses who are involved with just manufacturing in general, maybe have a very small portion of business that's doing online sales or direct retail. But regardless, they're keeping client data as far as their bank accounts or their credit cards that they're paying with, and even employee health records, anything that you have on file. Those are much more valuable on the black market, it's sad to say, than even the credit card information. And everybody's focused on the larger companies like Target and Home Home Depot, those who are getting hacked. However, everybody's at a risk. Maybe something more relevant to the lower and middle market is social engineering, where you are getting someone who is contacting you saying, hey, we really need this invoice paid by a certain time, can you please pay this? And they end up, accounts payable ends up sending out that check. And the person on the other end was disguising themselves maybe as a senior executive of the company. Those types of claims are getting much more popular, and they're not currently covered by your general liability policy. So again, going into some of those hidden costs of what you're currently paying for, yet they're not covered. But it's starting to come downstream where, because of these larger Home Depot and Target type attacks, the insurance companies in general are looking to increase capacity by getting more individuals involved with those types of policies. And so it's really becoming much more available for a much lower cost, much lower price for clients in the lower and middle market space.
You wanted the main slide back, right?
Yeah. And so really the point I'd like to drive home, I don't have necessarily the case studies that Bill has, but we take a holistic approach and not just trying to bargain with the insurance companies for the lowest price, we're really trying to evaluate the entire cost. And if I was able to come in and talk with insurers about, hey, how can we not only leverage the pricing down, but really focus on these costs and making the most efficient use of your risk management program, evaluating all the costs that go into either beneath the deductible or beyond maybe insufficient limits. We're doing the best job we can in that sale so that we are helping the valuation in that sale. Does anybody have any questions about maybe how we're doing things differently than just focusing on the premium aspect of insurance and how that's relating to maximizing the value of a business?
I've got a case study for you, and you're familiar with this, obviously. A customer of mine that I closed and funded last year, but I think that, I don't know if you remember off the top of your head, the total annual cost for insurance for this company that does about $4.5 million in revenue was $300,000 or something.
Yeah, so this particular business was entertainment, say, for children, and it was high risk from an insurance perspective. So this particular individual is a past executive, they want to move on to business ownership, something we're all familiar with in this group, and the revenues don't necessarily support what he's paying in insurance. Relative to some of my other clients that would be, say, in the $20 million space, he's paying 3 times as much as them with revenues that are a quarter. And so, from my perspective, the effort and the resources that I'm going to devote to this particular prospect at the time wouldn't be any different than the individual or the business that's 4 times the size or paying 3 times less. And so how can we go off of a commission structure, maybe onto a fee structure, and pricing it more accordingly to what that individual is going to require as far as resources. So if we take a look at that top left-hand corner as far as insurance premiums, what's built into the insurance premium is the commission or the broker revenue. What are we actually getting paid? Is that comparable, or is that appropriate for really the level of effort and resources that we're devoting? So many insurers that I work with, if I ask them, how much do you pay your broker? They would say, oh, well, I pay him X. And I'm like, well, that's how much is on your, what you pay in premiums on your policy, but you actually know how much you're paying the individual that's helping you determine the pricing. Well, no. Like, well, let's just say you estimate between 10 and 15%. A lot of them are very surprised when I asked them, I push back and say, do you think that's an appropriate amount? Is that something you would want to pay that individual to receive the service that they're providing? And a lot of times it doesn't line up. A lot of times commission isn't necessarily the most accurate representation of what someone should be paying. And so immediately, if we're having that type of discussion based on this type of individual who's in a very risky, high risk from an insurance perspective business, we can immediately have a cost saving right off the top by moving on to a fee structure. And I would think that in this particular case, if this individual has a $5 million business, they're paying, I believe it was over $500,000 in insurance.
Oh, I underestimated it. I'm sorry. $500,000.
Yeah, $500,000 insurance. It's a tremendous cost relative to the revenues we're bringing in. And if we take that example of say, 10%, $50,000 that you're paying this individual, I mean, that's probably 2 employees. That's or one full-time person devoted exclusively to managing the insurance program that requires maybe 2 weeks of work, added up over the course of the year. Not proportional. If we came in and priced accordingly and came in at and say just half of what they're paying to broker currently, $25,000 or $30,000 savings relative to that person, that's a tremendous value.
So you're kind of shining a spotlight on the insurance agency per se. I know you're not a spokesperson for them, obviously, but what was interesting about this particular deal is the seller, who would own 2 locations, and I'm financing the buyer, had an insurance agent that had been their insurance agent for, I think it was 10 years or something like that. I don't think they've seen or met with the seller in any period of time prior to the sale, and they gave them a token $50,000 discount on their insurance premium the year prior to selling, when in reality the more appropriate amount may have been $100,000 or $150,000 discount. So had the intermediary kind of looked at that and maybe drilled into it a little bit to say, how did this discount come about? The intermediary may have found out that there was probably another $100,000 on the table in commercial insurance costs that wasn't really looked at or addressed. And that times the multiple of the business selling, would have given the seller maybe a $300,000 or $400,000 higher sale price. So let's break it down for the intermediary. That means they would have made another $30,000 to $40,000 by selling the deal. So, these are big costs that aren't being looked at. I think the comment you made to me a couple months ago is, when was the last time you saw your insurance agent, and did the price go up or did the price go down? That was your first, I think that was 2 questions. Then the next thing you said was, well, if the price went up, how uncomfortable did you feel? Because the whole market is going down. So
it's unfortunate, in my opinion, the insurance industry sets the bar very low, and it's great working with a firm that is actually educating our buyers on the best way to drive the greatest value from the program.
great. Thanks, Joe. So let's talk about something that's almost a little bit more complicated to deal with a seller, which is a seller that's actively involved in the business, actively involved with all the sales, actively involved with meeting the customers, actively involved with everything in the business, and they aren't really looking at a succession plan, but then all of a sudden raise their hand and say, I gotta sell. Whether they have cancer, whether they all of a sudden think they have to sell, whatever, but have they built a business that they can truly sell? So, Jeff?
We have the pleasure of working with so many great small and mid-sized privately held companies. And I think what I need to do is start writing a little book about little quotes that I hear when I first go into these. One of my favorites tends to be my life would be so good if it wasn't for my employees and my customers. So I think I give a little bit of grief, but when I go into it, you deal with small sized companies on a regular basis. We do find that so much of the responsibility lies on the shoulders of the actual owner or the key management personnel. Oftentimes they don't want to look at the fact that they have to look for other employees to develop them. The whole purpose of our conversation is really maximizing the value of the company, whether it's maximizing the value of the company itself or the actual transaction itself. And owners don't typically look at it by saying, if I increase the value of my employees, I'm going to increase the value of the company. But what we do find, to Tom's point, is way too much of the client relationships, way too much of the vendor relationships, and oftentimes the identity of the client is tied up in 1 or 2 key people. So whether there is an event or not, I think that the issue, if they're looking to sell, they're always going to think that their company is worth more than it actually is.
I'm shocked by that. I mean, everyone I ask about the value of their house, they tell me exactly what it's worth, right?
It's tough love that we have to they all have to do in this room. But I think at some point, that's really what we run into. So there is a trend and a theme, and I see more receptivity to it when we're talking to people about them involving their clients and developing them. Oftentimes, they just don't know how. They've learned the way that they were taught, and oftentimes they just don't necessarily see the value of the company and increasing the employees. So at one point, we really have to sit back and just figure out what's the goals, and that's really where we work with a lot of companies companies to help them understand where they want to go and how they're going to get there from the standpoint. I've got several statistics. I don't know that I'll go through all of those, but the main point is that actually investing in your employees does make good economic sense for the organization.
Which one is that?
This is fine right here.
Okay.
There's a number of statistics, and I can give them to you, but ultimately, if you look at it from the standpoint of less than ideal leadership, is going to basically cost the company as much as 7% of their overall annual sales. And then I won't go through all the statistics, there's quite a few more of those as we go through. But I think, well, let me just share an example of one of the companies that we're working with right now. It's a technology company. It's 2 owners. They have 12 to 15 employees. The business is doing okay. The fact is that it's growing, but not where they need to have it grow. They do find out that they're working basically 10 to 12 hours a day, 6 to 7 days a week. It's not that they don't have employees. It's oftentimes no one can do the job as well as they can do the job. So therefore, they don't want to hand off some of the responsibilities to the people within the organization. And so they oftentimes become their own worst enemies. So this company approached us and said, okay, something's broken, we need to fix it. And many times the owners don't know that it's them that are broken. We all have our own businesses, we all know our strengths and our weaknesses. We are finding those who are more receptive to looking at themselves are more receptive to actually growing and more able to grow the company. So in this case, what we really did is we looked at where the time was being spent. What are they trying to achieve? They're not at a point where they're actually ready to sell the business. But the fact is that they know they want to be selling the business. When are they going to do it? And how are they going to get there? And they realized that by focusing specifically and only on them, they weren't going to reach their goals. So we actually helped them look at their high payout activities and understand their organizational high payout activities. Go through the process of defining roles and responsibilities within the organization. And then by doing so, they were actually, at this point, able to start working on the business rather than in the business. And that's one of the biggest themes that I see in all companies we deal with. So many of them are just so busy doing day-to-day activities that they're not actually managing growth and next steps within the organization. So by repositioning and refocusing their energies, they're able to step back, focus on the strategic part of the business, and then hand off to the developers within the companies, this technology software company, and stop doing all the type of work. What's happened is they've scaled back the hours, and it's enabled them to be more active in the selling process and to, we're about a year into this engagement with them. They went and landed the largest account, and they actually say that the reason they were able to do that was because they were available to do it. They wouldn't have actually seen the opportunity beforehand because they're so caught up in it. So in this case, it's a perfect example of somebody increasing the value of the organization right now through increasing the sales at this point, but also developing the infrastructure and working with their employees so that the business is not so dependent upon them. So that's one case. There's really 3 areas. There's trust, there's commitment, and there's loyalty. One of the things that the issue is, and I think, it seems like trust is old-fashioned. The fact is that if the employees don't trust the ownership of the company, they're not going to get engaged, they're not going to be committed. The next slide.
This stat, though, is important. I mean, that's huge. Companies with high trust outperform other companies by 286%. I mean,
statistics are pretty staggering when you kind of look at it. There's study after study. It's just not something that the owner is typically looking at them. And it's kind of hard for them to believe because they're just so used to doing it. They're not used to developing people within the organization. But if you go to the next slide.
But still, my numbers, I'm just bugged by this, right? So I own a $10 million company, and that means, so you're saying that it could be a $28 million company if I would just get out of the way? If I own it.
I can see that absolutely.
It's just a huge number. I'm baffled by it.
There are absolutely. Well, I think that's part of it. Not every company is going to experience that clearly, but there are enough when you start looking at the numbers that the statistics are pretty staggering when it comes to that. One of the ones that I think is most is that, and I think if you dealt with companies enough, most employees are not engaged. somewhere, I've heard anywhere from 14%, only 14% are highly engaged, but the average is around 30%, 38% of employees are actually engaged in the work. Why is that? Just because the owners don't involve them. Having gone through 2008, and then a lot of manufacturing companies realized that they didn't necessarily have to increase people's wages as much for many years thereafter. And having experienced that, what I saw is a lot of employees would put up with more than we think that they'll put up with. But it also realizes that it doesn't take very much to make employees very happy. And so those companies who actually are investing in employees are actually getting a higher return because they're getting engagement out of their employees right now. And by virtue of that, they're able to then step back and not do the things that they were doing before. So engagement and commitment is huge. And the final slide is actually based on loyalty. A lot of companies, a lot of people have one foot out the door. You look at that first one, 83%, based on salary.com, said they plan to look for a new job next year. And I will say, and working with most every one of my clients, and you know, working with your clients, turnover is expensive. It's very costly to the organization, not only dollars, but time frame of what's lost. So those three areas, you get companies to actually start focusing on that, then actually they can step back from the business and actually work on the business. But it is part of, I think, the challenge that you're faced with is we'd all love the deals as quickly as possible. But part of it is the preparation to get them to a point where they're ready to be sold. And if we could step far enough back into that, and for some of us this could be as simple as 6 months, but most of the time it's about a year to 18 months before you start seeing change, because changing leadership is a process. It's not an event.
Great, thanks. I have a couple more things to talk about, but specific questions from the audience, from any of our panelists? Guy?
What advice are you giving to employers about millennials and working with millennials?
He's bringing a microphone, but I'll repeat it. So what advice are you giving to employers about millennials and working with millennials? Is that right, Guy? And who are you directing that to? Jeff? Okay. Yeah, you can start it. Just making sure.
I just look at my name tag.
Right.
It's a great question. It's something that we hear a lot of, because if you take a look at a company, you could have a 50 or 60-year-old owner, you could have somebody in client services who's in their 30s, and you could have a tech person who's in their 20s. How do you actually get them to work together? One of the things that we're finding is involved more than anything else. They want to be involved, they want to make a difference. But one of the areas that they get most frustrated is if they're not being included in the whole process. So, again, it doesn't take a lot, but it's also reaching out to them to figure out where they think they can make a difference. Oftentimes the owners feel as if they have to be the ones to come up with the solution. Most of the employees are thinking about ways that they can see things and do things differently. This is another one of my quotes. When I actually talk to my people, I go into a lot of manufacturing companies and they'll say, I've got Sam over here has 30 years of experience. Well, what we find is Sam doesn't have 30 years of experience. Sam has 1 year of experience 30 times. And I think part of companies overlook the value that the millennials can bring to look at things a little bit differently. So we really recommend the engagement. Good question, thank you.
Yeah, to further add to that question, I can tell you now more than ever in the last 6 months, I've recently financed a couple of millennials, and I've never been more blown away in my life. I mean, conceptually, what they came up with as a business concept, how they started it, how they implemented it, how they're going to market using current technology. I have one set of millennials that primarily only advertises through Facebook. I have another set of millennials that only advertises and sells through Instagram. And I'm just dying to know which one's better and which one's not. I have another company that only deals with Amazon. And then the first company said they refused to deal with Amazon because of the cost. But each of them are all successful in their own right. But, like I said, I've been highly impressed with millennials, and I'll agree with Jeff saying the biggest thing is just get them involved and ask the question, and ask for their input. And every employee at a company needs to be involved somehow, some way. So the more you can do that, the easier it is to lead a company.
And they tend to work more collaboratively than people my age. I'm used to working things, a different way around my own. They like the collaborative work environment.
Other questions? Hold on. Yeah.
Yeah, in the example you gave about the client who had the epiphany of turning the mirror on themselves and
Yes.
identifying that they were part of the challenge, what led up to that? And then what was the most difficult decision they had to make to sort of steer the business in the direction eventually?
You know, what I didn't expect getting into this business is how many people are in the succession planning. And I think they weren't
In the
necessarily.
space? You mean how many people are working in
Well,
that space?
actually thinking about next steps for their business.
Oh, okay.
I think they're getting burnt out. In this case, this was truly an issue of the owners were just getting burnt out. And it was affecting the family life, it was affecting things at work, and they just knew if they kept going on, the business wouldn't be viable anymore. So their epiphany is, I don't have a choice, I have to do something different. And I think a lot of owners just do it the way they've always done it, work harder. And in reality, it's in our environment, due to technology today, oftentimes it actually creates more manic behavior rather than less. So it's harder to step back. So they realized they had to step back and look at it. And I'll tell you, the first meeting that we had with him when we did our kickoff type of meeting, one of the things he said to me, and I said, well, where are you? Because what I realized is that I always put other people first. And it's not like that was a bad thing, but the reality was he wasn't planning his business, he was letting everything else happen to him. So that was sort of the epiphany, what drove him to get to that point, but also allowed him to look at the mirror. And that's not true of a lot of employees.
I think you said that you increased sales, right?
Yeah, they got their largest account, but again, because the mental capacity was there to be able to accept it.
Other questions? Marcus?
Thank you. This is a question for Joe. And I'm dealing with a stock transaction right now where they're on the ownership of a company. And I haven't even looked at the insurance policies. I just got an email yesterday from the client saying, oh, we're looking at transferring the insurance policies. And I'm thinking, wait, are there going to be provisions in most insurance policies that say that if you sell the ownership interest of the company, you need to get new insurance policies?
Yeah, that's exactly true. Whenever there's a change in ownership, those policies are effectively canceled, and many times they can be rewritten with the new ownership named on the policies. So if the individual you're speaking with, that client, is maybe doing business out of it's being private equity bought or who the buyer is, but a lot of times the buyer will want his broker working on that deal, and they will take over the policies from the current owner, and then they get canceled, rewritten, if the sale actually transacts.
Yeah, I had a case where, the buyer actually got the declarations page or something of the current policy, brought it over to Michelle, your predecessor, obviously, but AJ Gallagher, and we looked at it, and we found actually two things. I think number one, we found that the drivers weren't insured, and this was a delivery business, so somehow through the course of their
Like I said, there's a very low bar for me.
yeah, well, and then there was some claims history there that the buyer wasn't aware of, but obviously if you're buying trucking or transportation companies and they have certain licensing or certificates, whether it's intrastate or interstate, some of those claims popped up, and sure enough, the buyer went back to the seller and said, what, the cash flow being X needs to be Y because you're underinsured by 50 to 100 grand. I can't remember what, and I think what we ended up having to do is every driver ended up having to have insurance independently, and that saved on that number, but it still caused the buyer a pause because they were significantly underinsured.
And that's certainly what we're doing day in, day out in our equity advisors group, working with private equity firms. And that due diligence process is actually evaluating what type of insurance policies are they buying, are they adequately insured, and how can we hopefully influence the buyer to get a better valuation than selling us.
One last question. Yeah.
On the insurance side, when you apply your model, what percentage of the folks that you use it with, do their total cost of insurance premiums go up versus down?
I don't know if I have a specific number I'd be making it up if I gave you one, but,
Well, pick an area of insurance that's gone down recently. What's gone
let's
down?
put it this way, we don't, we're not fortunate to win business unless we're the price leader. And a lot of times we're able to come in and break those ties by by actually decreasing the cost of insurance and showing the additional value that we're bringing. So I would say 100% of the time, and I say that with full confidence.
But you're not necessarily an insurance company, you're a broker that works with 30 different insurance companies or somewhere around there, right? So that allows you the ability to shop them all against each other if need be.
Exactly right. And so again, if you're looking, if you have a view of just strictly looking at the price of what you're paying on your premiums and not really looking at the total cost of risk, it's just narrow. And if we can expand the conversation to actually be evaluating the total cost, I would say without a doubt coming in every time and lowering the cost of risk. It's amazing. There's one slide, we won't go back to it, but what I'll say is insurance in general on a guaranteed cost program with low deductibles, and it's the most inefficient way to buy insurance. Why trade dollar for dollar with an insurance company? Why can't we move them along this spectrum towards self-insurance? There's many degrees varying between a guaranteed cost program, which dominates the industry, and how can we educate the buyer to buy more intelligently, buy more appropriately, closer towards self-insurance, raising deductibles, entering in loss control programs to prevent the claim to meet that deductible. There's other mechanisms that don't necessarily related to increasing the value of the sale or increasing the value of the company, but creating even their own insurance company, stashing away dollars that are tax deductible off of the business, tax-free sitting in this account. They come out of capital gains. You're saving the delta between ordinary income and capital gains. You're funding for things you're already paying for off your balance sheet, but you're getting the tax advantages of it on this self-insured program. And you're funding claims beneath the deductible, and you're even funding the exclusions, the things the insurance companies are saying, hey, we're going to insure you, but we're not going to insure you for any of these things. There's a long list of exclusions. Well, let's create an alternative vehicle and fund for those and take advantage of the tax implications of it.
So therein lies a whole other subject on captives and self-insurance, and so Joe's a good person to talk to. If I guess the point to be made here, MBBI is focusing on creating deals this year, and so what are ways to create deals? As an M&A intermediary or as an attorney or accountant, you know businesses that are likely going to be coming up for sale. And the question is, if you're transactional, you may not necessarily be involved in the sale until the transaction starts. But if you know, as their trusted advisor, that they're going to be selling in the next couple of years, then now is a great time to be able to introduce them to a couple of areas that maybe they should focus on. In the meantime, have you looked at your insurance lately? Have you looked at your occupancy costs and where you're located at? Have you looked at the management structure of your company? I know you work 100 hours a week, and you're talking about selling in 2 years. You don't seem like the type of person that's ultimately going to be able to sell. So I think at the end of the day, it's our responsibility as trusted advisors to these business owner companies to make some of these introductions, because what will happen is you'll make them a better company because of it. They'll be stronger, and then when it comes time to sell the company, then obviously they're going to look towards you to help them with that sale, whether it's legal, accounting, or actually selling the business. The other last thing I'll say is that MBBI is all about deal teams. So, from a deal team standpoint, I know, Justin, you're looking at buying a business, as you said. I know you're working hard to assemble your deal team, which is, who's covering your legal, who's covering your accounting for due diligence, who's covering your insurance, lending, all the above. And all these things are coming into account. So, at any rate, I'd like to give a round of applause to our panel. And, yes.
Great. Nice to meet you. Good luck finishing up.
Sure.